Hello, I'm Michael Steinman from Jazz Lives. I think it's January 5th, 2024. I have the immense good fortune to be sitting across from a very nice person.
February 5th.
February 5th.
Just to correct you.
Okay, thank you. We're going to get on fine.
Okay.
Robert Traynor, who happens to be not only a good person in a beautiful house, but he happens to be Bobby Hackett's grandson. And he reached out to me, and I came and said, let me ask you ridiculous questions, and he kindly agreed, because his grandfather is an absolute hero of mine and lots of other people. So you knew your grandfather because you all lived together, you said.
Yep. Yeah, since my whole life I always lived with my grandparents. My mother lived with us, and so I lived with them my whole life. Yeah.
And you remember first living in Jackson Heights?
Yes. Uh-huh.
Was that a house or?
Yeah, it was a house, and it's actually, they have a jazz map of Queens,
yeah.
And it's an old one now, and he's not on there. And I actually spoke to Ricky Riccardi, I think, from the Louis Armstrong House Museum, and they're coming up with a new one. It's the Jazz and Hip Hop map of Queens. And I told him, I said, hey, you know, are you interested in putting my grandfather? And he said, yes, do you know the address? So I told him the address was 3421 84th Street. And I said he lived there until, I think, 1971. He bought the house in Cape Cod.
And he and your grandmother had the house for a long time before that?
Yes, I don't know exactly how long. But they were there for, I couldn't say exactly how many years, probably 10 or 15 years maybe. That I'm not 100% sure. And I think my grandfather wanted to be in a more like a quieter area also. And the Cape was just, you know, it was a beautiful, beautiful house, nice area. But like I said before, unfortunately he still had to do a lot of traveling. You know, I think there was a lot of work up there, or more work in the summer months, because it's a big, you know, vacation destination. But for the rest of the year, he still did a lot of traveling while he was up there.
But if with a house in Jackson Heights, he was near to Manhattan gigs, and he was near to the airports.
Yes, yes. I remember as a little kid, this is before they even had security, going to the airport and meeting him, you know, when he came back from some of his trips.
Did he mind flying?
I really don't know. I guess he had no choice, really. Yeah. So he was, you know, he did it so often, you know. But that I don't know if he enjoyed it or didn't.
Okay. So you were from earliest birth to about 10 or 11 in Jackson Heights with them. And yes. So that's your grandfather, your grandmother, your mother, and you and your sister?
Yes.
Okay. What do you remember? What sticks in your mind?
He wasn't there often. He had a detached garage that he had like soundproofed, and he used to go in there, I guess, to, I don't know if he did recordings in there or just to, you know, to listen to music. But he had a great stereo set up in there, and he had it, like I said, there was like cork board on the walls to try to soundproof it and everything. So he used to go in there to do recordings and stuff and listen to music. And the house itself was like 3 stories, and I remember only his bedroom and my grandmother's was the only one that had air conditioning back at the time in the early 70s. So sometimes we would go in there and sleep on the floor if it was really, really hot in the summer months. I remember that. He used to take me to, there was a White Castle, I think it closed recently, on 88th Street in Northern Boulevard. And we would go there, and they would roll the window up about this high, and they would put the tray on the window, and we would eat White Castle hamburgers in the car. So that was a big treat to me. Yeah. And next door there was a toy store also, or close to it. So occasionally I would convince him to go into the toy store and maybe get a toy or something. I'm trying to think what else. I remember one time he went to go see Louis Armstrong, and I went with him. Unfortunately, Louis wasn't home, but we met his wife, Lucille, and he had a dog, a little German Schnauzer named Trumpet. So I met Lucille Armstrong and Louis Armstrong's dog, Trumpet, but I didn't get to meet Louis Armstrong, unfortunately. So, but he was like maybe 10 minutes away from us.
Did your grandfather have musicians over to the house?
I'm sure he did, but I really don't remember at the time because I was kind of young.
Yeah.
So
and you might have been put to bed.
I probably was, yes, or it might have been past my bedtime when they got home. I remember we used to celebrate Christmas on Christmas Eve because a lot of times my grandfather would work, and I guess he would get home at maybe 11 o'clock at night. So at 12 o'clock at night we would open up our presents, and so we'd celebrate Christmas Eve instead of Christmas morning, because also he slept late because he was always up late, out performing and stuff. So he wasn't like an early morning person because of his job and everything. It was a late night, the hours that he worked. So see what else, if I can remember anything else from Jackson Heights.
Did you watch TV together?
Yes, we used to watch. He would want to watch the news, and I wanted to watch Batman. And and a lot of times I got to watch Batman, so that was a good thing. I guess we used to compromise.
Because he was interested in what was going on in the world, I gather. He, had sort of strong views about world politics.
That I don't really know.
Okay.
He might have. That I can't really say. I remember watching the New York Rangers when they were on Channel 9 on television with my grandmother. But yeah, as far as TV, like I said, I think Batman in the news was probably on close to the same time, so sometimes he would watch the news, sometimes I got to watch Batman.
And you all had dinner together when he was home?
Yeah, oh yeah, yep. My grandmother was an excellent cook. She could cook anything, and I've heard stories that they used to have musicians would come over after they played, and my grandmother would make stuff at 12 o'clock at night. They would eat, she would cook for them and everything. But my grandmother could cook anything. She was an excellent cook, and we always ate well, even though we didn't have a lot of money. We always ate well, so that was a good thing.
One of the stories I've heard is your grandfather walking through the house practicing in his boxer shorts. Is this true, or is this
yes.
fantasy?
Oh no, that's true. That was comfortable to him. He was walking around in his boxers. Yep. I mean, and I don't blame him. Like, I feel the same. He was always dressed up for work. So when he was home, he wanted to be comfortable and relaxed. So a lot of times boxer shorts, or I guess if he was a little chilly, boxer shorts and a robe, as in the picture I showed you. So yeah, that was a true thing. Yep.
So you grew up with that sound all around you.
Yes, yes. Yep. And sometimes I wanted to watch. I'm trying to watch TV, and then they're playing watch cartoons on Saturday morning, and he's playing the trumpet. I'm like, man. But he would every single day always practice. Every single day of his life, unless he was really too sick to even practice. But he always remember him practicing. Yep.
What else do you remember about your grandmother? Because it's interesting. We know her from those beautiful pictures of her as a young woman at her wedding, and now we know she was a great cook. What else do you...
She never learned to drive, so in Jackson Heights that wasn't really an issue. When we got to Cape Cod, that was a big issue because it was a more rural area, and you really had to drive to go shopping and stuff. So it was a big inconvenience for her, and because she never learned to drive, But I don't know why. But she used to like to play bridge. After my grandfather passed away and we moved back to New York, I used to drive her into Manhattan, and there was a bridge club, and she used to love to play bridge all the time.
And
with her friends.
She outlived your grandfather by
Yes.
a long time. I don't remember my dates.
Yes, I think it was 2000 she passed.
Okay.
She passed away, so she was 85, I believe.
And did your grandfather drive?
Oh, yes.
Okay.
Yes. He always drove Chryslers for some reason. I think he liked Chryslers or Plymouth. Always had a station wagon. I think it was for maybe other musicians, like to load their equipment in and stuff. I guess he could always use the bigger car, having the station wagon. Up in Cape Cod, anyway.
You said he had like a wall of stereo equipment with recorders and speakers and all. Was this in Jackson Heights or in Cape Cod?
Both. But in Jackson Heights, I really don't remember the equipment too well. But in Cape Cod, he had at least 2 reel-to-reel decks, turntable, cassette deck. He always had a Marantz receiver with the wheel sticking out. He used to tune it with the wheel. Unfortunately, our house in Cape Cod was set kind of below the road, so even with an FM antenna, it was, you really couldn't get the greatest reception, But and he would go. That was in the basement, so he would go down there and play like classical music and everything. It was kind of loud, but it was down in the basement, so it didn't bother anyone. Excuse me. So I would go down there and get him when it was time for dinner and stuff, But he had an upright piano down there. And like I said, at one point he had 2 speakers in each corner of the room. He had 8 speakers at the same time. But he was very much into the recording and equipment and electronic gear, as whatever was available at the time. Even to now, I just think to myself, with what we have nowadays, boy, I wish he was alive to see how it evolved and what we have nowadays, what equipment there is, and what you can do with something this big, where we used to have walls of equipment, and like as I said, my grandmother used to say, I swear to God, one day he's going to get electrocuted back there, because he had so many wires behind all the equipment. He had it spaced off the wall so he could go behind there and hook up different equipment, at the same time or at different times.
So you said he loved gadgets. This
Yes.
I didn't know.
Yes. He loved watches. He had quite a couple of watches and cigarette lighters. He had, I think it was Dunhill was the company. Yeah. He used to have always getting different ones and see which ones he liked and everything. Unfortunately, he smoked all the time. He smoked Camels. So I remember driving places, even my wife when she was younger. I remember driving places and there would be like 2 kids in the back of the car and everyone else is smoking and all the windows are rolled up. We're sitting in the back like, can you open a window? But at the time, I guess that was the thing. Everyone smoked, and unfortunately, being a trumpet player, a cornet player, and smoking cigarettes, people are like, man, it just doesn't make sense, So,
well, Lewis, who lived 10 minutes away, used to tell people that it cooled the throat. So
maybe it did. Yeah,
I don't know.
I don't know.
They believe different things.
Yeah. Yes.
So, tell me something about Barbara, because I'm always interested in her, because maybe 25 years ago, a friend of mine who knew her put me in touch with her, and I bothered her the same way I'm bothering you, and she said, I don't know what I would tell you. And it was clear that door was closed.
Right.
What do you remember about your sister?
My mother. That's my mother.
Your mother.
My mother.
Well, I need a flow chart.
Not a problem. Nothing too much, really. I mean, she was a good mother, but unfortunately, like most of the time, like I said, I lived with my grandpa. I lived with her and my grandparents. When my grandfather and grandmother moved to Cape Cod, they asked me and my sister if we wanted to come live with them, because it was really a nice area. And I loved it up there. I would go through the woods and everything and go swimming. There was a pond down the road from us. And my sister was 4 years older, and I think she kind of liked, you know, she had more friends and stuff in New York, so she kind of liked staying in New York better. And she would go up there during the summer months and stuff. But I liked it better up there, so I said, yeah, I'll live up here. So, and I think my grandmother was happy too, because when my grandfather would go away, she would have been by herself. And as I said, she didn't drive, so I think she was happy having me up there. And then my mother used to come and visit, you know, occasionally when she could and stuff. And then when my grandfather passed away, we moved back to New York, back in with my mother and my stepfather. So.
Did you go to school up in Cape Cod?
Yeah. Oh yeah. From 5th grade to 8th grade. And then when my grandfather passed away, I came back to Jackson Heights, and I went to Monsignor McClancy High School, Jackson Heights, which my uncle actually, that's his alma mater, was McClancy. And
we're talking about Uncle Ernie Hackett, the drummer and vivid personality, who I've also talked to about your grandfather.
Yes.
What else sticks in your mind, if anything, you know?
I'm trying to think. My grandfather used to love to eat good, and you know, fortunately, he married my grandmother, who was, as I said, was an excellent cook. There was a place on Cape Cod that's still there to this day called Marion's Pie Shop, and they would make pies, sweet and savory. So, and they would make all these specialty items. Excellent food, very good place, and I said they're still there to this day. Whenever I go to Cape Cod, I'll always go there and get something. So he would go there and buy a whole bunch of stuff. Give my grandmother a break once in a while from cooking, you know. But he loved to eat good food. I remember that. When we were in Cape Cod, I guess a lot of people will confuse the trumpet with the cornet. So he had a rubber stamp made up, and it said, I don't know if it was quotation marks, "It's a cornet." So when he would pay his bills, he would take the rubber stamp and stamp the back of the envelope, "It's a cornet." And I always thought, like, I wonder what these people are thinking when they get this. What does this mean? It's a cornet on the back of the envelopes. But he used to rubber stamp stuff, "It's a cornet," on the back of the envelopes when he sent the mail back out.
Maybe they thought he was a spy.
I don't know, yeah. I don't know, but it was just a funny... He had a dry sense of humor, I guess, but he was very smart, and he had a good sense of humor, you know, so...
When you hear him talk on radio broadcasts and things like that, it's clear that he was a very keen observer of the world. He didn't talk a lot, but when he did, you could tell that he'd been thinking about what he was going to say.
Yes, I guess so, yeah. Yep. So, I remember sometimes when he'd be away, he had an address book, and we would look through the address book, and we would look at all the famous people, and we were like, wow, look at this. And we'd see Frank Sinatra or Tony Bennett or Louis Armstrong. We were like, wow, look at this. Is, you know, me and my sister or whoever was around. It was something fun to do, you know. I know he was very good friends with Tony Bennett. Also, another person from Queens, from Astoria, yeah. I believe.
Well, there wasn't a singer on the planet who didn't want him to play in back of her.
Yes.
So, or him.
Yes.
And there are a lot of beautiful records where he's, you know, doing beautiful embroidery.
I even heard that Louis Armstrong mentioned that if he's singing, he wants to have Bobby Hackett playing in back of him.
Yeah.
I don't know if that's true, but I've heard that story, which could be true.
That is how I first became acquainted with your grandfather, because he was playing obligato in back of a Lewis vocal on the second record I owned.
Oh, really?
Ain't Misbehavin' from the Town Hall concert, or there's a solo there, and I thought, who is this? So very beautiful. What else? I'm glad you told me they'd like to eat. I'm always interested in my heroes, the vision of them sitting down to eat something.
Yes, yeah. And he used to experiment with different foods and drinks and stuff, and he wasn't afraid to try anything. So like he would say to me, he would say, "What do you think it would be if we mixed like Coca-Cola and orange juice?" I'm like, "I don't know, let's try it." You know, and he would try just crazy combination. He would try all different things, which you know, unfortunately, as a diabetic, it was probably the last thing he should be trying. Yeah. Either one of those two things. But he'd be willing to try anything, all different things, you know.
I remember in the two things in the Whitney Balliet interview that I talked about with you a little bit. One of them is your guest appearance, which I'll mention, and the other is toasted peanut butter and bacon sandwiches that your grandmother made for them.
That I don't remember. I do remember him. He used to take a banana and slice it down the middle and put peanut butter in the middle. Like people have a peanut butter banana sandwich, but he would have that without the bread. Just a banana sliced down the middle and put peanut butter in that, and then put it back together. I remember that. I'm trying to think what else. I remember one time, I think they asked him to pick up some veal cutlets, and he came back with like 5 pounds of veal cutlets. It was enough for I don't know how many people, you know. My grandma was like, "Why are you buying so much?" But he didn't have an idea of how much to buy or whatever, you know. But he did like to eat good, you know.
And the music you heard in the house, there would be his classical music in the basement and his stuff in his own studio and him walking around practicing. Basically, that's it. Was the radio on in the house?
Yes, I believe so. Like I said, our house in Cape Cod was set so low, below the ground level. Really, it was a little difficult. I know my grandmother used to listen to a lot of tapes of my grandfather. Yeah, there was a couple of stations that we got, probably Boston stations, you know, that he used to listen to.
Yeah.
You know, I know he put an antenna up in the attic to try and get a better reception when we were there. And people used to say that they could hear him practicing. I think they thought that he was out. We had a back porch practicing, but it was mostly he was in the living room, but we had the screen door, the doors open. So they could hear him, you know. It was just a couple houses, but a little bit further away, like through the woods, you know. So some of them, they could hear him practicing at times also.
And when he was practicing, was he just running scales and intervals, or was he playing tunes?
No, a lot of scales, mostly a lot of scales. And then I remember asking him when I was young, can you play like Christmas songs or something like that, and he would play Christmas songs for me, you know, with the trumpet or the cornet, you know. I remember that. Just to break it up, like I said, a lot of time after hearing scales every single day, you're like, oh boy. Sometimes you need a little break, you know.
Yeah, and if you have somebody walking around the house making beautiful sounds like that, you want to hear something you recognize.
Yes, exactly. Yes.
You were starting to tell me a story about the car.
In the winter months, we had a long driveway, and I would have to shovel the driveway and stuff. Or if it was really cold, my grandmother would ask me to go start the car, and I would start the car and let the car warm up before my grandfather had to go, to go play somewhere. It was a place called Wequassett Inn. He played. I don't know if that was during the winter months, but occasionally I would do that. And then when he went away, they would let me. I would move the car a little bit, so I would drive the car up and down the driveway a little bit just to move the car. I guess they thought it was good for the car or whatever. I used to do that.
Do you remember? You ever hear of a place called the Rooster? Does that ring any bells?
No.
It's pretty much before your time, but a friend of mine who was a collector taped him with Bob Wilbur and Dave McKenna and two local guys named Dave Sibley and another Dave. This is maybe 1966. this is, you had been very young.
Oh, okay, yeah, that's before my time, I guess. That was in the Cape?
Yes.
Oh, okay.
But you said you went, or you saw him at a place called the Columns with
Yes.
Dave McKenna?
Yes, I know he really enjoyed playing with Dave McKenna, and Dave McKenna was a great guy also, very friendly, very nice to people, and he would play there, I guess, as often as he could because it was so close to the home in Chatham, and I was there, I don't know, 2 or 3 or 4 times when he was playing, and he used to. Sometimes he would bring equipment and record himself, or the other guys as they were playing. He used to have a battery-operated reel-to-reel. It was a Sony tape deck that I actually inherited when he passed. But he used to bring that, and he used to play in another place called Wequassett Inn. I think that was in Orleans, which is like the next town, close to Chatham also. I've seen him play at a place called Dunphy's, also in Hyannis. It was a place he would play often. I guess he tried to play local places so he could stay and not have to do a ton of traveling when he was up there.
When I've done research on him on the internet, there was a restaurant called Bobby Hackett's, which I think had nothing to do with him whatsoever in that area. So.
That I'm not familiar with, but there's a restaurant called Jack Hackett's, which was my uncle. Well, they said he was my uncle. I don't know if they were really related, but they used to say that they were. He had a restaurant somewhere in Massachusetts. I think it was Wakefield, maybe. There's actually an album, I think, that was recorded there with him and my uncle on drums.
Okay.
At that place. I'll see if I can find it for you, if I could show you.
After I'm 10 miles away, if you go on the internet and you look up Bobby Hackett's restaurant, you'll see there was an actual place.
Oh,
and,
okay.
I asked your uncle, he said there was no connection whatsoever. But
yeah, none that I know of either. Yeah.
So, you said your grandfather was a Mason.
Yes. Yes, and I remember when after he passed, my grandmother was concerned at the time that he wouldn't be able to have a Catholic mass, but when she spoke to the priest and everything, and it ended up it wasn't an issue, so we were able to have a Catholic funeral and everything. And I remember at the graveyard, there was a lot of people there, and there was a lot of people in the mass, and it was really sad for me at the time when they played like the jazz music during the mass. It was just, for me, it was just a very sad thing. I don't know why. Like I enjoy the music and I enjoyed what he played, but just during the mass, hearing that, it was a sad thing for me.
Maybe it didn't fit, or maybe it was just a reminder of what you'd lost.
Yeah, possibly. That could be. I mean, yeah.
He was not in the best of health for much of his life, I think, but his heart attack was a horrible surprise to people.
Yes, yes. And I remember reading somewhere they said that when he was in the hospital in Hyannis, the only time they got more phone calls was when Jack Kennedy was younger and was in the hospital. They said there were so many people calling about his health and see if he was okay and everything. And he was in and out, I think, towards the end of his life. And he was probably only out, I don't know, maybe a week or something. And he was starting to play again, and then he had the heart attack.
Yeah. A great loss. A great loss. The only thing is, in that interview, 2 things. One of them is, he says about Louis Armstrong, he isn't dead as long as we can hear him. And I think that really reverberates with me about your grandfather. And I'll close off by saying, in Whitney Ballier's interview, there's a little boy who pokes his head in and says, "Hey, Pop, can we go fishing?" And you've confessed to me that you were that person.
Yes, that was me.
So everything comes full circle.
That was me. And my grandfather wasn't really an outdoorsy type of person, so he wouldn't really be the one, someone to take you fishing anyway. But you know, if I needed a ride somewhere, he was the only person, because, as I said, my grandmother didn't drive, so maybe it was a little wishful thinking on my part. But there was a pond right down the road we used to go fishing in and stuff also.
Did you catch anything?
When I was younger, I don't think I did. I've been there in the past. A couple of years ago, I caught a nice largemouth bass in there and put him back in the pond. And then we used to go, we had friends of ours that had a boat, and we used to go on their boat, not fishing, just, you know, bumming around. And then their son I used to go with, and we used to catch scallops, and we used to get a whole bunch of scallops and stuff. But in the pond, when I was young, I didn't really know what I was doing. I really didn't have much luck. You know, we used to catch frogs and turtles and stuff, but not a lot of luck fishing.
For some reason, I can see your grandfather eating White Castle out of the car. I can't see him standing there watching you fish. I don't know.
Right. Well, as I said, he wasn't really like an outdoorsy type of person. So, you know, but for music or musical equipment or stuff like that, you know, he really enjoyed it. You know.
Well, I'll close off and I'll say I've enjoyed this. You are a kind person to take your time to tell me these stories, tell us these stories.
Great.
And Grandpa isn't dead as long as we can hear him.
Yeah, that's the thing with any musician. They live on through their music, and you know, fortunately, there's so much of it is recorded. They live on, like, you know, like you said, it really is true. You know, even people that I love to listen to. Stevie Ray Vaughan, B.B. King, Les Paul, you know, all these people, you never lose them because of the recordings. Yeah, you never lose them. And now a lot of videos, you know, so it's a nice thing. It's nice when I hear him. There's so much music from him, but I really appreciate when people do interviews and I hear him talking. It's really cool for me, you know.
Yeah. Because that's the voice you heard when you were a child.
That's what I grew up with, yeah. So it's nice to hear him and hear his opinions on things and how he talks about with people and stuff like that. Yeah.
Well, thank you, Bob Traynor.
Sure. You're more than welcome.
Okay.
Thanks for being a fan of my grandfather.
I'm more than a fan. I'm
Yes, you are. That's a good thing, though.
Oh, yeah, but I mean... I have to tell this story, and you've already heard it, and I probably told it in print, that when I was growing up, the music of Bobby Hackett was everywhere. It was in the supermarket, it was in Macy's, it was in elevators because of Muzak.
Yes.
And my mother, who didn't like jazz but liked beautiful things, would have WPAT-FM from New Jersey on, and she knew that I loved Bobby Hackett. So I would be in another room doing something, heaven knows what, and she would call me and say, "Your friend is on the radio again." So I've always thought of your grandfather as my friend, even though we met in person maybe twice and we spoke a sentence and a half to each other, but he's...
Oh, that's great.
He's close to my heart.
I meant to ask you if you have met him.
Yes.
Oh, that's great, and that's excellent.
Twice. I saw him a number of times at fairly close range because he would be at the Sunday afternoon jam sessions at Your Father's Mustache that the bassist Red Balaban was leading in 1972. And my story is that I brought a copy of Coast to Coast or Coast Concert for him to autograph it, and I said, I was very shy. Mr. Hackett, could I have your autograph? And he said, sure, in that low voice of his, and took the record out of the sleeve. And I was already a hypercharged record collector, and I thought, what are you going to do with my record? and he took my Flair pen, and this is how long ago it is, and he wrote in beautiful handwriting, "Thanks, Bobby Hackett," on the label, and put it back in the sleeve, and it's a very treasured possession.
Oh, nice. That's great.
And my good friend Rob Rothberg came with me to one of those sessions where your grandfather and Kenny DeVerne were in the front line. And Rob, who equaled my love of your grandfather's music, said to him, "Play Embraceable You," because he wanted to hear it 2 feet away. And Red Balaban launched into a tirade about how musicians get asked to play their requests over and over and they shouldn't be asked to do this. And your grandfather turned to Red and said, "Let the kid alone," and played it.
Oh, nice.
So,
nice.
Sweetness of heart.
Nice.
So, those are my stories. Okay.
Oh, that's great. That's great.
In my experience, all the good stories come out once the camera gets shut off.
Yes.
And I mentioned to Bob that there's a beautiful video of his grandfather playing Sweet Lorraine at Nice in, I think, 1975, and that provoked a story.
My grandmother traveled with him to Nice at the time, and I remember when she came back, she told me, because, you know, I guess it was kind of shocking for her. She told me, she said, "Oh, you would love Nice. All the women are topless on the beaches there." So it was pretty, you know, being 12 or 13 at the time, you know, it was funny for her to say that.
That's great. Thank you.
Uh-huh.